Block 1. The spark that lit the fuse. I was 2 months away from my second anniversary at Alderaan Lynn Pharmaceuticals when I discovered the file. A small, inconspicuous PDF buried deep in a project folder labeled Q3 Roll Forward Archives. It was a quarterly compliance report. Standard stuff. But this one had numbers that didn't add up. Literally. 30 vials of an experimental immunosuppressant drug logged as delivered to a clinic in Utah. A clinic that, according to my vendor database, had closed its doors 6 months prior. I double-checked, triple-checked, then brought it to Marcy Breen, my supervisor and the VP of Regulatory Affairs. She didn't even blink. "Jessica, that report is old. Probably a clerical error. Just annotate it and move on." But I couldn't. Our department's very existence was built on one thing: data integrity. I was hired to catch these kinds of things, and frankly, the mistake didn't seem like a mistake at all. It looked like a cover-up. A week later, we had a surprise audit. Not just internal, FDA. And that's when the real trouble began. On the morning of the audit, Marcy pulled me into her office. Her tone was soft but chilling. "Jess, you remember that old Q3 report? If anyone asks, you verified it. You signed off." I stared at her. "But I didn't. That's falsifying records, Marcy. It's correcting a discrepancy. The drugs were moved. The clinic just wasn't officially reopened yet. Don't overthink this. You're asking me to lie." She smiled, or something close to it. "I'm asking you to do your job." I didn't lie. When the auditor asked about the report, I said I wasn't the one who verified the delivery. I was honest. The audit didn't tank, but it flagged the report. Marcy's name wasn't even on it, just mine, because someone had inserted my initials digitally, post-dated. I didn't confront her. Instead, I documented everything. Every email, every Slack message, every calendar meeting where I was instructed to review the altered files. Then, strange things began happening. I was removed from major project chains. My access to our regulatory filing system was revoked temporarily. And then came the HR complaint, alleged insubordination, disrespect toward a senior manager, repeated failure to meet deadlines, all completely fabricated. I spent my evenings combing through policies, building a case, and drafting a whistleblower complaint, quietly, meticulously. And then, my apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen. But my company-issued laptop was gone. That's when I realized this wasn't just retaliation. This was war. Block 2. The smiling predator. After the break-in, I couldn't sleep. The fact that only one item was taken, my company laptop, felt less like coincidence and more like a message. But the police filed it as a simple burglary, no signs of forced entry. Maybe I'd left the door unlocked. I hadn't. The next morning, I walked into work and found my desk cleared. Not just tidy, empty. My nameplate gone. My dual monitors removed. Even the ergonomic chair I had requested through HR was missing. I marched straight to Marcy's office. She was drinking coffee, calm as ever. "Oh, Jess, HR should have told you. You've been temporarily reassigned while we investigate some concerns." "Concerns? What concerns?" She clicked her mouse, didn't even look up. "Behavioral flags, internal complaints. Honestly, I tried to protect you." Protect me? I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. One where the truth got you exiled, not promoted. "Someone broke into my home," I said quietly. "Took my work laptop. I filed a report." She raised her eyebrows. "That sounds serious." "It is serious. I think it's connected." "Well, if you think someone in the company is responsible, I suggest you go through official channels." "I am going through them. This is me going through them." Marcy set her coffee down, stood, walked around the desk. "Jessica, let me give you some advice. This industry rewards loyalty, not drama. And frankly, you've become difficult. We can promote someone who doesn't know when to play as part of the team. There it was. The unspoken threat wrapped in professionalism. I walked out. Not to cry, not to scream, to escalate. I contacted an employment lawyer that night, and I submitted my whistleblower file. The annotated reports, the falsified approvals, the system logs showing when the altered files had been uploaded. I sent it to the internal compliance hotline and anonymously to a contact I had at the Wall Street Journal. Because if Marcy wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong target. Block 3. Detonating the silence. 3 days after I sent the whistleblower report, something shifted. It wasn't immediate. The world didn't explode. But the temperature in the office changed. People stopped making eye contact. Slack went quiet. My keycard stopped working for certain floors. Then I got a calendar invite titled, Compliance Review Meeting, Confidential. When I showed up, it wasn't in a conference room. It was in legal. 2 compliance officers, 1 HR rep, and a lawyer from the corporate risk department were waiting. They slid a printed version of my own report across the table. "We received this," one of them said flatly. "Are you confirming authorship?" I paused. Then I said clearly, "Yes, I stand by every line." They didn't respond. Instead, the corporate lawyer cleared her throat. "While we review these claims, you are being placed on investigatory leave with full pay. Your access will be restricted for the time being." So I'm being punished for reporting a crime? This is standard procedure. But nothing about it felt standard. When I got home, I found an envelope under my doormat. No postage, just my name in block letters. Inside was a single printed screenshot of my bank statement, a transfer I hadn't made, $2,500 to an unknown account. Below it, a typed message. "Keep pushing, and we'll push back harder." That night, I didn't sleep. I forwarded the threat to my lawyer. He called first thing in the morning. "They're trying to rattle you, but they slipped up. If this escalates, it opens them to criminal charges, not just civil." "They're already in criminal territory," I said, "and they don't care." Then we make them care. The next day, the story broke online. Exclusive. Senior exec at Alder & Lynn implicated in regulatory cover-up. It hit the journal's front page with a red banner. Within an hour, the CEO released a statement about internal restructuring and a third-party investigation. Marcy's name wasn't mentioned, but I saw her office blinds shut for the first time in 2 years. That same day, I received a text from a blocked number. "You think this wins you anything? You're just another problem they'll pay to bury." But they didn't know me. I wasn't looking for a payout. I was looking for truth, and for the first time, they weren't in control of the narrative. I was. Block 4. The fallout begins. The company tried to put on a brave face. They released polished internal memos about corporate integrity and employee empowerment. But everyone knew the truth. Alder & Lynn wasn't managing a scandal. They were containing a fire. The day after the news broke, 3 department heads resigned. Not laid off, not reassigned, resigned. One of them was the VP of Finance, someone I'd barely interacted with. Another was the director of clinical trials, who suddenly retired early. The third? Marcy. She left without a statement. No goodbye email. No fake excited to announce my next chapter LinkedIn post. Just gone. Except she wasn't. Because 2 days later I saw her in the parking garage. She was sitting in her car, engine off, staring through the windshield at the exit ramp. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She looked like a woman who had bet everything and lost. And still, I didn't feel safe. Because while the company scrambled for damage control, I was still living with the consequences. My email was flooded with interview requests, legal queries, anonymous tips, and hate mail. Some called me brave, others called me a traitor. A few hinted I'd ruined careers just to boost my own. One message stood out. It came from an intern I barely remembered. "Thank you. I saw things but thought it was normal. It wasn't. You proved that." It was only one sentence, but it reminded me why I did it. Then came the deposition request. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. My lawyer called to prep me. "They'll try to rattle you, undermine your credibility, suggest you misunderstood procedures." "I've got the receipts," I said. "They can't erase the truth." "No, but they'll try to redefine it." The night before the deposition, I got another message. This time a voicemail. It was Marcy. "Jess, I never wanted this. I was protecting a system that punishes you if you don't play along, but you broke it. Congratulations. Just know, they're already looking for the next scapegoat." Click. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning, and I intended to prove her wrong. Block 5. The scapegoat strategy. The deposition was held in a glass-walled legal suite downtown. It looked sterile, but the air was thick with tension. Lawyers in tailored suits, SEC agents with iPads, court reporters typing like their hands were on fire. I was the youngest person in the room by at least a decade, and the only one not wearing navy or gray. They started soft. Questions about my role, my responsibilities, how long I'd been employed. Then they moved in. "You were responsible for reviewing internal reports, correct?" "Yes." "So, why didn't you catch this error sooner?" I kept my tone even. "Because I wasn't the one who created the report. My job is to verify, not to fabricate." The SEC attorney leaned forward. "But the report had your initials." "Digitally inserted, not by me. I submitted logs showing the timestamp and metadata." They didn't like that answer. But they didn't push back, because they knew I had the receipts. That was the moment I saw it, a shift, a silent recalibration. I was no longer the employee trying to stay employed. I was the witness they needed to complete the puzzle. And Marcy? She was no longer the architect. She was Exhibit A. In the days that followed, more subpoenas were issued. Alder and Lynn's stocks dropped 17%. A second whistleblower came forward anonymously, a former compliance analyst who had resigned a year before under personal reasons. The house of cards was collapsing, and now the company wanted to settle. My lawyer called with an offer. 6 figures, NDA, non-disparagement, immediate severance plus extended benefits. I asked him, "And what happens to Marcy?" "She's cooperating. No criminal charges, just permanent industry blacklisting." I said no. Because money wasn't the point. Accountability was. So I gave an interview. Anonymous at first. Voice disguised, face shadowed. But then the editor asked, "Would you ever go public?" And I thought of all the Jessicas still sitting in glass-walled offices, being told to just fix something that wasn't theirs to break. I said yes, and I didn't use a fake name, because hiding is for people who did something wrong. I was done hiding. Block 6, a face for the firestorm. The article went live on a Wednesday morning. By noon, my inbox had more messages than I could read. Journalists, attorneys, former employees, students, women, men, people. I didn't know who said things like, "You just described my exact experience." I thought I was crazy. I wasn't. Thank you. Not all messages were kind. Some accused me of being an opportunist. Others called me career poison. But I didn't care, because something unexpected happened. More people came forward. Within a week, 5 additional employees contacted the SEC with supporting evidence. One of them, an executive assistant, turned over calendar logs that showed exactly when Marcy E.'s team fabricated backdated documents before regulatory reviews. Another found Slack messages from a private group chat between directors joking about tweaking timestamps. It was no longer a case. It was a culture. The company responded, of course. They issued statements about regrettable lapses, promised to rebuild trust, and fired their chief operating officer. But it was too late. The board brought in an external firm to run damage control, Internal memos leaked. Someone posted a spreadsheet titled Jess's Timeline, a play-by-play of every time I had been gaslit, undermined, or retaliated against. It was chilling, but it was also vindicating. Because the worst part of whistleblowing isn't the fear, it's the doubt. You start questioning yourself. Did I overreact? Did I imagine that meeting? Did I misread that silence? But seeing it laid out, in cold, irrefutable text, it took the shame out of me and put it back where it belonged, on them. And then, the real blow landed. The Department of Justice opened a probe. This wasn't about ethics anymore. It was about fraud. Marcy wasn't just blacklisted. She was now under federal investigation. And as I watched it unfold on the evening news, I realized something. I wasn't the main character in a scandal. I was the crack that collapsed a facade. And I wasn't done yet. Block 7. The Reckoning. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was relief. Relief that someone, finally, was paying attention. That my fear had been justified. That the gaslighting, the retaliation, the whispers in the hallway, it hadn't all lived in my head. Because now, it was all on the record. The Department of Justice subpoenaed over 3 terabytes of Alder and Lynn's internal documents. Meetings were canceled. Executives started resigning preemptively. Investors demanded emergency briefings. The company's stock tanked 28% in 2 weeks. They rebranded their compliance initiative and gave it a new name: Project Rebuild. Ironic. They weren't rebuilding. They were excavating, digging out the rot that had been hiding under polished marble for years. Meanwhile, I was offered a book deal. The publisher wanted a first-person account of corporate sabotage, integrity, and survival. I didn't say yes immediately. I wasn't sure I was ready to relive it in that way. But then I got a DM from a woman who'd have been fired from a competing firm for reporting gender discrimination. She wrote, "Your story made me open a folder I'd buried 2 years ago. It reminded me that silence only protects the wrong people." That's when I knew. This wasn't about my voice anymore. It was about ours. So I signed the deal. And I started writing. Not just the facts. Those were already documented. I wrote the emotions, the betrayal, the gasps in the shower at 2 a.m., the shakiness in your fingers when you hit send on that email that could end your career, the ache of watching a company you once admired eat itself alive from the inside. And in the final chapter, I wrote what Marcy said to me the last time we spoke, before her indictment. She looked at me across a coffee shop table she didn't want to be at and whispered, "You always thought you were smarter, but you don't understand the system. It's not about who's right. It's about who wins." And I looked her in the eye and said, "That's why you lost." Block 8. Rewriting the rules. The more I spoke, the more others came forward. A nonprofit contacted me. They wanted me to keynote a summit on ethical leadership. I laughed when I first got the invite. Me? A regulatory analyst turned whistleblower? But I said yes. And I stood on that stage, looking out at a sea of faces, women in suits, men with notepads, HR managers, ethics officers, students with wide eyes. And I told them, there are 2 kinds of power in any system, the kind that protects itself and the kind that protects others. The first looks invincible, until someone speaks. The second, that's the one that changes things. Afterward, people lined up to talk to me, not because they saw me as a hero, but because I had done something they recognized. I'd named what they were afraid to admit. That sometimes, integrity isn't rewarded. Sometimes it's punished. But that doesn't make it less necessary. It makes it more. Alder and Lynn was fined $42 million in a federal settlement. They avoided criminal liability, but only barely. Their new CEO issued a public apology and launched a complete overhaul of their internal compliance infrastructure. Marcy took a plea deal. She won't serve time, but she's banned from holding any executive position in regulated industries. As for me, I turned down several job offers. I didn't want to return to the same world I'd just exposed. Instead, I joined a policy advisory board focused on corporate ethics. I consult, I teach, I write, and I mentor others like me, people who once whispered, now ready to roar. Because if there's one thing I know now, it's this. They count on your silence. They build entire careers, entire cultures on the assumption that you'll stay quiet. But when one person breaks that silence, it echoes. And if enough people echo back, it becomes change. Block 9. When the noise fades, the truth remains. I still get emails. Some from former coworkers who never said a word back then, now reaching out to say, I always believed you. Others from strangers who found my story online and want to know how to do the same. How to speak up. How to not lose themselves in the machine. And every time I answer, I start with this. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be unwilling to forget who you are. Because fear will come. Doubt will crawl into your bones. But you don't have to give it the final word. One day I received a handwritten letter. No return address. Just 3 words. You were right. I knew the handwriting. It was Marcy's. No apology. No excuses. But also, no denial. And maybe that's as close as people like her ever get to accountability. I folded the letter, slipped it into my journal, and kept writing. Because my story isn't about her. It's about me. And how, even in the midst of sabotage and gaslighting, I chose truth. Even when it cost me comfort, co-workers, and career safety nets, I never surrendered my name. I never surrendered myself. By then, my book had hit the bestseller list. It wasn't the fame that mattered. It was the validation that our voices matter, even when the system wants them silenced. Especially then. Block 10. My voice, my legacy. I used to think justice was a gavel and a verdict, a courtroom, a confession, a clean ending. But I've learned that justice is quieter than that. It's the peace of waking up without fear. It's the power of walking into a room knowing your silence is not for sale. It's the emails from women who say, "You helped me choose not to stay quiet." Justice is knowing that the system that tried to erase you now has to carry your name, etched into every policy it rewrites, every training it mandates, every whisper it dares to silence. I walk different now, not because I won, but because I refuse to lose myself. There are scars, yes. I've lost friends. I've been called things I wouldn't repeat. I've doubted my sanity, my choices, my strength. But what I gained? That's unshakable. A community, a platform, a mission. And if someone asks me today, would you do it again? I wouldn't even hesitate. Because in a world where lies are normalized and truth is punished, being loud is an act of resistance. And I didn't come this far to whisper. I came to write it down, to say it out loud, to teach others to say it too. Because I may have started as an analyst, but I ended up something else entirely, a disruptor, a survivor, a name they'll never bury again.